Are you okay if we wait a minute? Are you okay if we wait a minute? Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started with our afternoon program. Hope that you all enjoyed lunch. I'm going to introduce the first two speakers in our afternoon program. And then after these first two speakers, we will take a break and come back for our last two presenters. So our first presenter this afternoon is Jim Kichas. He is an employee at the Utah State Archives, and he is a certified archivist. He holds a master's degree from the University of Utah and is currently working on a master's degree in Library and Information Science from Drexel University. He'll be addressing us on building digital trustworthiness at the Utah State Archives. And then our second presenter for this first set of speakers is James Olschewski from the Utah Department of Transportation. He will be talking about their experience in archiving UDOT right-of-way records. And he is a professional land surveyor who has spent the last 25 years designing and recruiting right-of-way for UDOT, both as a consultant and now as the Deputy Director for Utah Department of Transportation. So please help me welcome Jim to the podium.
Well, thank you very much for letting me have the opportunity to talk to you today a little bit about digital trustworthiness, what we're doing at the State Archives, and sort of what my life has become recently professionally. I think probably full disclosure up front, like a lot of people who get roped into this, I have no real formal training. I'm sort of just figuring it out as I'm going along the best I can. But I have found that there are a tremendous number of resources, a lot of really useful things that have helped me build my own knowledge and apply it to what we're trying to do at the State Archives. So hopefully I'm able to kind of pass along some of that to you today. First thing that I think I want to talk about is a rule that keeps coming up over and over again in every resource I access. And it's actually a rule that's been with us for a long time, as you can see. Shakespeare in King Lear says, "Striving to better oft we mar what's well." Another version of this comes from Voltaire, who says, "The best is the enemy of the good." And a third iteration of it, "If you never miss a plane, you're spending too much time in the airport." All of this is to say that any informed action, you throw them in the garbage can, which would be a bad step backward. Anything you do, even thinking digitally about your records, that's a step forward. And as you do that, you'll notice you'll start to get some positive momentum. You'll start to get other people on your staff integrated into that way of thinking. Basically, we don't have the luxury anymore of letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. These records are with us, and we need to deal with them. We don't have the luxury of putting off the problem anymore. And one of the other things I've learned in dealing with electronic content and building a system to preserve it is you're not alone. Everybody struggles with this. There are a whole bunch of different resources and things out there, but it's something that not everyone has a handle on, and there will never be a perfect solution to handling and preserving digital content. There will always be the good enough, and that's really what we need to keep in mind, be aware of, be realistic about, and move towards. So with that, the topics that I want to kind of walk us through today, I want to talk about what it means to be a trusted digital repository and why you should care about that. I want to talk about how we at the Utah State Archives are starting to embrace these concepts of digital trustworthiness in our programs and systems as we're designing and developing them. And then how can governmental entities work with us in partnering to raise the overall level of awareness around the state and ensure that the state's entire digital program rises up and is robust and doing what it's supposed to do. So I think first off, it's probably good to just talk a little bit about what is it about digital records, electronic records, that makes them unique and so difficult. Because really, when you think about it, the content itself, the informational content, is the same as it has been forever. You're still dealing with correspondence, you're still dealing with reports, you're still dealing with memorandum. Electronic records can certainly be more complicated, like databases and GIS resources, but at the end of the day, records are still records. So what we're really talking about is the format that's changed for us. Digital formats are inherently fragile, they're inherently complicated, and they're inherently ephemeral, which is why we have to deal with them now, when you have them sort of in your hands and you're working with them. It's unlike a box of records, which you have the luxury of. A box of paper, you can put it on a shelf for 50 years and forget about it. Probably figure out something about the context, do your work, and nobody would ever know. Similarly, if you had a report and for whatever reason a paragraph in that report faded away, there's probably enough context around the rest of that faded paragraph that you're still going to understand what was going on in that record. With a digital record, though, you lose a little bit of content, the whole thing goes away. So I included the image here of the 3¼ floppy disk. It's sort of the universal thing that everyone laughs at. Everyone remembers them, and you may even have some hanging around. But a good object lesson here is they're fairly durable. The information might still be on there, but how are you going to access it? Who has 3¼ floppy drives anymore that they're actually keeping around and using? So these are all questions we have to sort of think about as we dive into electronic records and think about what it means to build trusted digital status, which is really the ability to maintain authentic and accessible information over an enduring period of time. So foundational to the idea of being a trusted digital repository is what is known as the Open Archives Information System, OAS. Sorry, you get a lot of acronyms going on with this stuff. This is a theoretical model that was originally developed by NASA to deal with their huge data sets, and it's been embraced in the digital preservation world as a theoretical framework under which you can work with your digital content. The nice thing about it is it's general, very high level. It gives you a map of how to do things, but it doesn't tell you you have to use these tools to do it. So it's very flexible in terms of how you actually implement your tools under OAIS. So just to give you a really, really brief walkthrough, the far left-hand side, that's your record producers, so your offices, state agencies. The middle gray part is the content management system, so that would actually be the environment we're creating at the Utah State Archives. When the information comes from a state agency to us, it goes into this information system where we are able to work with it, store metadata about it. You'll see that that gray area is is buffered by administration and by preservation planning, both of which are key to ensuring its sustainability over time. And then the far right end is the consumer side. So when somebody comes back and wants to retrieve something from the content management system, it comes out, and if everything's gone how it's supposed to, it's maintained its authenticity, and the trust is there. You know that we're a trustworthy repository. We managed it correctly over time, and end result is people get what they need. So the standards for becoming a trusted digital repository have evolved quite a bit. I'm not going to bore you with all the minutia of that. Suffice it to say that over the last 20 years, there's been several iterations and building-ons and steps. The two kind of really important ones, first in 2007, the Trusted Repository Audit and Certification emerged as sort of the gold standard for repositories to strive towards, and you could actually build according to the rules of that certification, bring in an auditor, and be certified. That has subsequently been replaced by comprehensive ISO standards, so international standards, which are even higher level now and even more comprehensive. This is the first one, ISO 16363, which defines a recommended practice for assessing the trustworthiness of digital repositories. So this came out in 2012. And then subsequently in 2014, ISO 16919 came out. And now this defines the requirements for organizational bodies who provide the audit and certification for being a trusted digital repository. And since that trusted digital repository is a mouthful every time I say it, I'm just going to refer to that as TDR from now on. So this standard actually gives direction to the auditing agencies now. If an organization comes to you and they claim that they've met the certification standard and you need to audit them, these are the steps you need to do to make sure that happens. So the question becomes, why certify? And I put certify in quotes because I highly doubt any of us in the room today are ever going to actually go through this process. And I say that because under the former 2007 track requirements, only a handful, I believe 5 organizations actually certified under that. And ever since the ISO standard of 2012, nobody has certified. And partially it's a matter of timing. It takes huge institutional commitment, both in time, labor, resource, and funding to actually pursue the track or the digital repository status in an official capacity. Why I think it's still useful to what we all do is, simply put, it becomes, it provides you a template and a checklist that any organization can utilize in monitoring, in developing and building their digital programs. Secondly, even though a lot of what they spell out in the requirement you probably will never look at, it is still a wonderful tool for helping to determine where your program's at, where you want it to go, and then you can strategize about how to get there. And it also provides the benefit of ensuring that programs and projects are built upon internationally accepted standards, so that we're all kind of speaking a common language and working in a common way. And the Society of American Archivists, actually just a few months ago, their newest training module that they published is this guy, module number 8, Becoming a Trusted Digital Repository. If this is something you're interested in, I'd highly recommend getting a copy of this. What it does is it moves through the 3 core elements that any repository would benefit from in exploring trusted digital repository status. So even if certification isn't your aim, developing procedures and systems that adhere to core TDR elements will help build a dynamic, effective digital preservation program in a repository of any type or size. So I'm going to move very briefly through those 3 core elements that he talks about in the SAA module. The first one is the organizational infrastructure element. This is section 3. This is all about laying out the organizational groundwork for digital preservation. It ensures that a digital repository is both accountable and reliable. And it does this by focusing on areas that include governance and organizational viability, organizational structure and staffing, procedural accountability and preservation policy framework, financial sustainability, and contracts, licenses, and liabilities. So really just the core, like, what does your program look like from the ground up? The second core element of the TDR, digital object management. So really this focuses in on how you actually handle and manage content when you receive it. The tools and systems and your way of evaluating your operations. So it's focusing on ingest, the capture of material as it comes from the records creator into the environment, processing decisions that are made with that material once it arrives, preservation planning, information management, access management. That's really what's at heart of section 4. And then the final section he focuses on, section 5, infrastructure. And the analogy he uses in the book for this is, you can sort of think of this in the analog world as sort of like your building security, your environmental control, your disaster planning. What are you doing? What steps are you taking to ensure that if something catastrophic happens to your system, all is not lost and you can move forward? So with that rush through job of explaining what a trusted digital repository is. I hope that kind of makes sense. Now I want to move into what we're doing at the Utah State Archives. We're still in the very formative stages, but 2015 has been a big year of steps and momentum building for us. And so kind of my year started out with thinking a lot about this and thinking, well, we'll never probably reach trusted digital repository status, but it's a really nice way of benchmarking and setting goals and priorities and allocating resources. And so how could we go about doing that? And one of a librarian at MIT, Nancy McGovern, has actually developed a tool for this. It's the track review tool. And she's intellectually doing a lot of the heavy lifting on all these concepts for a lot of us. So this is accessible online. And what it does is it breaks down the specific sections of the ISO standard for being a TDR and offers guidance for completing. So this is what it looks like when you go onto the website. And you can see it provides a scale of compliance. So off to the left-hand side, you see those are your requirements. Those are what are expected of you to be a trusted digital repository. You can click on those. They're all links. And it'll take you to the section with the actual language about what it means. It'll give you examples of what that might look like in your institution, maybe a policies and procedures manual, maybe a COOP plan, something like that. There's a lot of things that can sort of fit within these requirements. Then it gives you a compliance rating section, so you can track how these are changing over time. It's a scale of 1 to 4. And then it gives you a progress bar, a status bar of whether it's in progress, you haven't started it, or it's finished. So taking this tool, I built our own for the Utah State Archives. Same exact idea fundamentally. Really the only difference is color-coded it for now. So we know red things are things we're still working on, yellow are things that were in progress, and green we've finished. The other idea behind this is this gives us a way to kind of evaluate each of these and be like, oh, well, that doesn't really matter to us that much. We can just pop that one out and shorten the list overall. So as I said, it gives us a good guide of knowing kind of what we've done and where we're going and a path forward, and it helps us sort of allocate our resources and prioritize our needs a little bit better and a little bit more coherently in a strategic way. So it's great to think about all these things, but if you don't have actual infrastructure for doing any of it, that's a huge obstacle. So the second sort of major step for us this year was actually a negotiation that we had, months-long negotiation with DTS, Department of Technology Services, where we actually sat down with representatives from there, including a project manager, and explained to them why we're unique and why we need systems that look and operate this way when the whole DTS model is kind of not into that at all. And so it required us needing to assess and then figure out how to express our needs to them. And the biggest lesson I took from it is that communication just ends up being a huge barrier most of the time. IT people speak one way, archivists speak another way. So learning how to sort of interface with each other and speak in a way that it actually does get things moving. And once they understood what we were kind of going at and what we needed, they were pretty compliant with figuring out, helping us devise methods, because we didn't have the expertise of knowing, whoa, this system that we need might look like this in the DTS world. And as a result, we did end up with an agreement with them, which is now going to serve as the backbone and the infrastructure for our entire program. So we ended up with a quarantine machine, which is the machine we can now bring material in, run virus checks on. We're equipping it with a bunch of old drives so that we can take legacy media and pull stuff off and manage it. It now means a new processing space, which is a device they've installed in our building, which allows us to pull material over to it, work on it, and more storage space for our content management system, things like that. So that was one big step, and specifically this sort of addresses core elements 3 and 5 that I spoke to earlier with regard to having a sustainable system and having long-term planning for that system, both of which are really critical elements for a digital preservation program. Another major step for us was coming up with and drafting a high-level digital preservation framework, which you can now access on our website. So web link is right down there. This is an 8-page, 8 or 9-page document that provides sort of the highest top-level view of critical digital preservation principles and mandates for the Utah State Archives. It provides necessary vision and structure for how, on a whole host of issues that include standards compliance, roles and responsibilities, ongoing organizational and financial sustainability, system security, and procedural accountability. So really, in essence, this document provides the broad strokes of our program. It's meant to be general, it's meant to be broad, it's meant to be something we can always point at and say, at the end of the day, this is what we're doing. Specificity will come in later in other documentation. We are fortunate at the State Archives to have a content management system that can handle electronic records. It does the work of ingesting, preserving, and disseminating e-record content, and it performs the wide variety of actions that have to run on in the background. Luckily, the majority of them are automated, but they have to be taking place. We always have to have checksum validations and different things to make sure that the records aren't changing when we're not looking at them in an appreciable way. So the current challenge is documenting that system and building policies and procedures for the work that's done using it, and then getting our staff trained and comfortable with using it. It's one thing to have the system, it's another thing to actually be able to use it competently. So that's led to the next thing that has been absorbing much of my year, which is the actual drafting of a comprehensive formal policy and procedure plan for our digital preservation system. And it's comprehensive, it touches on all phases, all parts, from the ingest to how we actually manage it once it's with us, to dissemination, to documenting all of our decisions over time with regard to our systems, changes we might make in the system. It's meant to include all of that. So just as a sort of, to tell you how my process has been for doing this, we met in committee over several months and sort of devised a table of contents of this is what we think a policies and procedures manual should include. Then I created a 200-something page Word document, which is nothing but the heading and the page through this, again in committee. It's very long, it's very tedious sometimes, but the end result is that our work, that it will give a very high level of detail to our systems, our work, and offer training and guidance for how to do the work for future staff. Because you know, the reality is, the people who are doing this work now are probably not going to be the people who are going to be doing the work into the future. So we need to address the long-term sustainability of our program, and having comprehensive policy procedure, that's a very effective way of doing it. And then the final piece that I think has been really important for us is just sort of raising the overall awareness and education of our staff. Again, the idea that communication is key, but people are coming at it from different angles. Some people just have more in-depth knowledge about these things than others. So we all need to have a baseline sort of that we're talking from. And there's a whole world of information, like I said, out there. I just chose a few that I've accessed more than once. So the best practices exchange. It's an annual conference that's held that talks about these issues. If you go on their website, they've actually made available a lot of the past content for meetings, so you can pull that and look at it. One of the most important is the Council of State Archivists State Electronic Records Initiative, SERI. They have what's called the PERTS portal, and I forget what PERTS is an acronym for now, but what they're doing is they're actually pulling in examples of work that state archives are creating, different policy documents, different examples of different things, and this has the benefit of now sharing. People can take this and run with it and create it and make it their own, not have to reinvent the wheel. The digital preservation management, that's, again, a tool by Nancy McGovern, the MIT librarian, gives a really good sort of initial startup of how to do things, and then ramps up as your knowledge increases through some different trainings and things offered there. And then the Digital Society of American Archivists is now offering a digital archive specialist certification. The only downside to this one, it's a class-based certification. Classes can get pretty expensive. A nice thing is that many of the classes are available in a webinar format. So you could pay for one webinar cost, bring your entire staff in, sit down, watch it, and everyone benefits from it. And we've actually taken pretty great advantage of that this year, had several DAS classes for our staff in our building. So I'm going to wrap up here by just going over how state agencies and governmental entities can help us build digital trust statewide. And again, I think first off, most important reminder is just do anything. You know, a positive, good faith step forward is better than nothing. We just no longer have the luxury of ignoring or hoping that this becomes somebody else's problem down the road. And I think this graphic is really useful for seeing that. The space between doing nothing and doing something is pretty infinite, and then from doing something to perfect, like nobody notices. So, you know, just take action. The next step, just begin thinking digital. Any forward action should come from an informed place. So take opportunities to learn more, like you're doing here today. Access the whole host of resources that are emerging. The digital preservation community is still a new one. It's still finding its footing. But there are a lot of experts who know a lot of stuff who are very accessible and very happy to give guidance on these issues. So just simply thinking about digital preservation is a good first step. And as I said, momentum will build. And then lastly, the cornerstone of any effective archival preservation preservation program for digital content is effective records management. And the more we can work directly with records creators and records managers, the more likely we are to acquire content that has the potential to endure over time. Doing this helps records officers and managers fulfill the obligations and mandates that they're responsible for. And so as we're getting our program off the ground, getting it going, you know, we look forward to working with everyone around the state in making it successful and making it an enduring piece of the Utah State Archives programs and services. So thank you very much for your time. I've given my contact information here. I'm happy to try and answer questions or at least point you in the direction of people who would probably know things. And I'm also happy to provide any links. I've built a really huge list in my bookmarks now. So I'm happy to share any of the links I've sort of accumulated over time. So I guess if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to try and answer them. Okay. Well, easy enough. Thank you. Oh.
Okay, so it was. No, hang on. Good afternoon. Are we ready? Are we excited? Excellent. Okay, my name is James Olschewski, but my stage name is Indiana Jones. And since we're talking about archiving and history and old stuff, got the khaki pants, got the boots. So with your imagination, picture the nice physique and the flowy hair, and you know, I'm missing the hat and I'm missing the whip. So you know, I thought we'd kind of, I just wasn't sure. So it's one of those know your audience moments. So I just wasn't sure where we wanted to go with this today. So I got to do two things for you today. And if you don't mind, I'm kind of a roamer, so I'm going to kind of roam around and leave the mic. So hopefully it'll still, nope, I'll have to grab, I have to get my stuff. So we'll try it this way and see how well this works. So I got to do two things. One is kind of a history of UDOT to kind of help everybody understand what we do, why we do what we do, and it kind of lays the foundation for why we have the records that we do. Plus the fact that we're more than just the orange cones you see on the freeway and the aggravation that you have when you want to leave here tonight, and all the wonderful names that you give with our little 4-letter acronym. So it's more than just who we are. We'll get into the actual what we used to do, why we did what we did, and kind of where we're going to go today. And obviously, if I get too far away, it doesn't like to keep track of me. And then we all have this wonderful idea as far as going paperless, right? It's a great idea. We're going to make it work. And we can talk about what we actually have today, what's actually going to work, what doesn't work, and importantly, for UDOT, what is working for us. So let me begin. UDOT's motto is keeping Utah moving. We're very serious about it. We have new technology that's helping, and you can go onto our website at any time, and you can download our mission statement. You can see what we're about, and our #1 goal is all about 0 fatalities. It's not a byline. You see it on TV. If you go to the movies, you see the 0 fatalities ads that are promoted. It is something we take very seriously. When they first thought about that motto, everybody's wondering, well, what is the goal? You know, is it 10? Is it 5? Is it 2? How many casualties and how many fatalities are really acceptable? And I think we'd all agree 0 is it. We need to preserve the infrastructure. You want to get home tonight. When you leave here, you want to be able to drive home safely, sound, be able to get there. And how can we do this incorporating all of today's technology, which includes trails, bikes, rapid transit, whether it's UTA, the BRT system, or just I need to get in my big, huge SUV and drive over everybody and get home. How do we want to do this, right? So, UDOT's roadmap. We have a vision, we have a mission statement, and we have very strategic goals. And we actually have this as a handout that we pass out to usually almost every one of our conventions and all of our seminars. But I encourage you to go to our website. It's udot.utah.gov, and you can see these and download them and see what it is we talk about. Now, the history I was talking about. So, we're going to have a little history lesson. Welcome back to school. Thank you for being my students. As I said, Indiana Jones here, so you're in my classroom. Remember the class? It's going to be a long session. Okay, real quick, boring stuff. UDOT was actually not first created. Actually, in 1909, Utah state law created the State Road Commission. And it consisted back then of the governor of the state of Utah, a state engineer, the state treasurer, and one member of the Agricultural College of Utah. And who knows what that college is? Very good. And of course, the University of Utah. Sorry, a little bit of pride there. It consisted of the county road commissioners, and the county road commissioners were the ones required to secure all the public right-of-way for the State Road Commission. In 1933, the state law changes the power from the county road commissioners to the State Road Commission. And suddenly the brainchild for UDOT starts to be realized. In 1945, state law grants the authority to acquire state highways and limited access facilities to the State Road Commission. In 1953, it changes to the Department of Transportation. And in 1975, the State Road Commission is dissolved and all of its assets are turned over to the Department of Transportation. Now you're saying, well, okay, I don't get it. What is the big deal? Why do I need this history lesson? What is the big deal behind this? The first slide, or the first date, that is when we started tracking and keeping records. So now when you start thinking about, okay, well, how many records do we really have? What is going on? Kind of looks like this, right? How many records do you have? How are we going to sort through this? How are we going to figure out what do I need to keep? And why? What is the game plan? So, UDOT. What do we do? Anybody want to give me a real quick, what do you think we do? Road construction, orange cones. No, we build. We build nice big facilities. Our mission and our vision statement is designing cutting edge facilities. That is what we do. Now, how we do it becomes another strategic milestone. Right-of-way comes along, and our challenge and where our mountain of data and documents come from is how do we acquire the land that is needed for these projects? Some of them are very large, some of them are pretty small. But that being said, we need to figure out how we're going to accomplish this. And we kind of talked about the authority by which I get to do this. You saw where state law created the DOT. But more importantly, so you have an idea, we're not just the big, huge bulldozer, although some people would like to think that is the case, and whatever UDOT wants, UDOT gets. That is not necessarily the truth. The U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights is what affords you and me as citizens the rights to protect our home, our properties, as well as provides the department the ability to go forward and improve our infrastructure as well as what fits the society as a whole. The DOT is governed by both the Bill of Rights, federal law, federal regulations, and state statutes. Now, I mentioned your and my rights. The Fifth Amendment and the Bill of Rights afford us that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Now, again, the reason why we're going through all this, you're going to see my mountain of papers again, and it comes back to how do I do what we do and what is the right approach. Because, again, the other part behind this, I want to make sure you understand, we're not just out there just bulldozing things. There's a process, and every agency has a reason and a need, and you collect data, we collect data. How do we then store and handle said data? One of the things that we're governed by, which helps add to our mountain of data, is the Uniform Relocation Assistance and Real Property Acquisition Policies Act. Big long word. Basically, which means, in a nutshell, how do I address your property rights? How do I ensure that I protect you? How do I pay for what I'm taking and make sure that I'm doing it correctly, properly, and that you're being, you hear the horror stories and everything in between. Now, this applies to any UDOT project, whether it's federally funded, state funded, whether there's a little bit of property, a whole lot of property, and especially any relocations. And I zipped through that real fast, I apologize. Any property acquisition, whether it's a temporary construction easement, a perpetual easement, if I'm buying land in total, all of that requires some type and form of documentation. And I think you'd all agree, when it comes to state agencies, we're great at manufacturing paper. The paper supply companies love us. Whether it's Staples or you name the paper company, they love when we come calling, and it's not by the ream, it's by the cases, right? So when we're trying to get more and more away from that, how do we get to a digital stage? Now, I mentioned this real briefly. UDOT's policy and procedures, and especially the right-of-way side, is we are to provide for the uniform and fair how I treat you as a landowner when I come calling. What is the correct and proper way to ensure that I have dealt with you properly? Because ultimately, that is our goal. We want to make sure we acquire the property correctly and in an agreeable format. Now, how do we accomplish this? Well, there's several ways. We have right-of-way maps, we define the corridor, we try to identify the property that's needed, and we definitely try to relocate all the property owners out of the way first. Now, every once in a while, we miss. You know, the paperwork got lost, you know, we promised it was in the mail. I mean, yeah, we missed. Now, this is where it gets to be the fun part. How do we handle the paper? How do we handle the volume of data? How do we acquire property? What's involved? What resources do we need? What resources are available? UDOT has, like most state agencies, we have our manuals. We have a lot of manuals. We have our design documents. We have our forms, policies, procedures. You name it, we pretty much have it, including a whole cabinet full of just maps, which is, I think, the one unique thing that separates from most other state agencies is we have maps. That makes us better. Because Indiana Jones again, you know, X marks the spot. I got to find how to get there. You know, it's all about the treasure trove, right? Okay, additional required documents. Well, this becomes the unique what if moment. What happens if we don't agree? What happens if I need to create more documents? What happens to those documents? Where do we go? So in a quick nutshell, how do we define what we do? How do we accomplish what we do? We define a corridor, we identify the property that's needed for the project, we talk to the owners, we relocate when needed, and I'm going to create a mountain of paperwork. That just sounds so encouraging. I create maps, notices, contracts, appraisals, negotiation logs, and that's just for one owner. So every time I have a project with multiple owners or even multiple parties of interest on a single property, it exponentially increases. So I can create documents in a huge way, including if I have to condemn, and everybody hates that word, if I have to go to court, and how do I deal with recording fees? How do I incorporate the county recorders into what we do, including the county surveyors? So it adds a whole new intrigue to what we're going to do next. So we talked about the history. Now let's talk about what we've been doing in the past. So I have from 1909, right? Now I think many of you will recognize what we have done. All of our documents were paper or microfilm, carbon copies. How many used a mimeograph machine? Weren't they fun to use? Yeah. We had the blue line machines, so we got to smell like ammonia when we were done. So, but the same issue. So we're still talking about maps, notices, contracts, appraisals, negotiation logs. The same things I just mentioned. The key now is I'm required to retain all this information. So the same things we just talked about, I'm required to keep all the original copies. So it starts to look like this. And then it migrates to this. And then it migrates to this. And that's the simple format. And then suddenly, well, that's not enough. So all of a sudden I'm into, oh yeah, warehousing. And we haven't even talked about state archives yet, have we? So I guarantee each of you in your own divisions, you have a room that looks similar to this, right? Thank you. And I'm betting someone, if not you yourself, your desk looks like this. I've got a pet project. I'm getting ready to archive, and I'm scanning, or I'm doing something. I'm not sure what that something is, but I'm doing something. So now this is the best part I like. So we have an idea. We're going to go paperless now, right? Because isn't that kind of the whole, we're archiving, we're going right? That's the reason why we're here. And government in action. And how many of you, Ronald Reagan, he has one of my favorite speeches. I'm with the government. I'm here to help you. Haven't you guys heard that before? I should have kept that speech. But yeah, I think you'll appreciate this.
In order to bring perfection to the crudely conceived idea.
Let me start this again.
For a number of years now, work has been proceeding in order to bring perfection to the idea of transmission that would not only supply inverse reactive current for use in unilateral phase detectors, but also be capable of automatically synchronizing cardinal parameters. Such an instrument is the turbo-encabulator. Now, basically, the only new principle involved is that instead of power being generated by the relative motion of conductors and fluxes, it is produced by the modal interaction of magnetoreluctance and capacitive directives.
We hear that?
The original machine.
No. Okay. That's okay. Well, we can plug that back in. The bottom line is he's giving a presentation on a new transmission called the turbo encabulator. Bottom line is it doesn't function, doesn't work, and it has so many different moving parts to it that it'd be totally impossible to build, let alone manufacture. And at the end, the price tag is $17 billion. And of course, the government's willing to buy and pay that and actually make that work, right? So we're all excited about that. So this kind of goes back to what are we going to do, how are we going to do it, what is the right approach, how do we move forward? In your own offices, what was the right approach? What's the process? How can we scan the data? Because for us now we're talking about I have a plethora of data. How am I going to convert the paper documents into data that I can store electronically? What do I get back? What am I going to use? And what do I do with the papers? So, UDOT incorporated a program called ProjectWise. And ProjectWise is a Bentley product, and it's basically a fancy Windows Explorer on steroids, which allows us to copy and incorporate all of the files we have into a database that I can attribute and then recall at any moment's notice. And we have spent several long committee meetings in the different divisions, just similar to what I would imagine you have done as well, where we've identified the file naming structure, the attributes we have and that we need, and how we want to be able to research this data in the future. For right-of-way, we actually created an actual book, an actual manual. It's a naming convention where all of our files have a name and they're related to projects. We attributed them, and then we can store all the data electronically. And this is actually on our server and online on our website, where if you want an example, you can see what it is we've actually created. So as I was pointing out here, it shows that I can attribute the file, and if you wanted to know by section, township range, route number, street location, because everything that UDOT does, of course, is not normal. Everything we do is by either state route or by township and range, because we kind of follow along what the counties did as far as where and how did you buy your property and where is our property stored. A lot of what we do has to include our CAD manuals and our CAD design, because of course we talked about the maps, the one cool thing that separates UDOT from any other place. And we have a set of manuals that do the same similar deal. It describes what it is we're storing, how it was created, what our consultants use, so that at the end, my maps look pretty, only an engineer can read them, and we go back to the same problem where I have a house in the middle of a road and we're trying to figure out why. But ultimately, how am I going to provide a data stream and information that I can recall at any moment's notice? So we talked real briefly about where we came from, what we've done in the past, and how we were thinking about going paperless, and what do I have today. So what we did is, who knows, or I'm going to throw out an acronym here, UCI. Who knows what UCI is? Utah Correctional Institute. So they have, if you're not aware of it, they have a scanning department, and they are wonderful. They do an amazing job. We had 28 of those cabinets that I showed you earlier. 28 cabinets, 4-drawer cabinets, totally full with data. Maps, drawings in every conceivable format you can imagine, whether it was old Mylars, whether it was tissue paper, whether they were cool color drawings, it didn't matter. They would take it all, and they scanned it all for us. So we had 106 drawers that we sent, and they scanned over 800,000 images for us. We were able to then take all of that paper, we boxed it up nicely, sent it to state archives, and for us, for this stage of the right-of-way, was under Series 25168, and they nicely took 288 boxes, and we weren't done. That got me from 1909 to about 1970. And then I realized, oh my goodness, not only do I have more at the complex, I have 4 regions I have to play with. So we continue to go to each of the regions and grab their data, and our cool little scanning project mushroomed into an additional 17 cabinets where an additional 50,000 images were scanned, and we sent an additional 137 boxes to state archives. In one of the other regions, we had these little weird binder boxes. It's amazing how it's interesting what you can find in a state agency when things get buried in a closet. And when we uncovered that, we found these boxes, and again, we found old projects that had never seen the light of day since they were first built, and we again scanned an additional 10,000 records, images for us, files, of which 37 boxes were sent to the state archives. So in ProjectWise, what we did is we created 2 things. In ProjectWise, it would actually accept from the scanning department a spreadsheet that would list every single one of the files that they had created for us, and we could attribute them automatically. And this is a sample of the spreadsheet. It looks very long and laborious, and yet it was very easy. UDOT does everything by PIN and project number, and then we did our file names, where it was associated, and all the information related to it. Tied it all together, and it automatically updated ProjectWise, attributed it, so now I have a database that is functional. And now I get to keep all my files on a live server that I can access at any time. And this is what ProjectWise looks like. This is at the project level, and this is at the individual file level. It looks very similar to Windows Explorer, which makes things easy. Now, I'm not here to sell you on ProjectWise. This works for us. The nice thing is it works for all of our regions, and everything that UDOT does is within this, and we maintain all of our project data inside this system. So I mentioned UDOT's 4 regions. Here's another bonus. If you need anything from UDOT, especially right-of-way related, these are the individuals you can call and ask for information. Now, I didn't provide their phone numbers because I wanted to force you to our website so you could see our vision and our motto and our mission statement, and then you can see these phone numbers. So it was a shameless plug for UDOT to make you come and look at our stuff. So with that in mind, I would be happy to answer any questions you have.
I have a quick question. What do you mean by attribute a file?
To attribute a file, let's say that I have a file, or I'm looking for a road in Santaquin. Santaquin could be an attribute, the name of the town. So I can link a file name to a city, to a county, to a state, or any particular, any piece of information I want to be able to search on later. So it becomes a searchable element. Yes, very similar to metadata. So the question, attributes similar.
I saw on your, excuse me, on your database there were PDF files and it looked like Word files. Is that what the product of this scanning was?
So the Word files were our source files. Those were created internally in-house. The scanning that was done by UCI, they converted everything into PDFs for us.
Okay.
So we had a choice in scanning, and let me actually talk a little more about that from UCI standpoint. They will scan into any format you want. If you want it into a TIFF format or a JPEG, we chose PDFs because we could actually put more pages into a single file to try and reduce the file size, but also to organize the data in a logical format for us. And then that's where our naming convention comes in, so we group our files by certain file names, and then again, they're easier to locate and file. But you can choose whatever you want. And then the nice thing there again is if you want a TIFF file or something else, PDF will convert to a different format if you want.
The information that was reflected on the spreadsheet, after they scanned that information, what did they have to input? I guess what I'm asking is, what was the learning curve of the individual that was doing the scanning? We seem to have a problem in our office, depending on, regardless of what kind of instruction or format we ask them to use once they scan something, you know, to name it or something of that nature. Each person has their own idea. How did you navigate that?
So the beautiful thing for us, when we sent our data to UCI, and there's two parts to this, but I'm going to talk to UCI to begin with. They are very good at following explicit instructions. Now, think that through. We're talking about the Utah Correctional Facility. They follow very specific instructions and instructions only. Now, the nice thing is, and I don't mean this facetiously, their scanning department is a bonus, or it's not the common work environment for a prisoner. They actually have to interview for that inside the prison facility, and it's one of the most coveted jobs out at the state prison. So we get basically the cream of the crop, and we get the guys who are willing to work and who want to put in an honest day and actually produce something out. So they all have to follow specific instructions. And there's more than just one person watching them, and it's not just the guards. So they have internal staff watching one another like bird dogs to make sure everything gets done, because they know they're not the only choice. We could send this data elsewhere and have somebody else do it. So they're competing for resources and for projects. So they have been very good to work with, and they follow the instructions, and so there's not a problem. Now, as far as our staff internally, this is where policies and procedures kick in. This is where we lay down the rules of what data we want created and how, and when somebody doesn't follow the data, it actually stands out like a sore thumb, and you get to go back to them and say, hey, what are you doing and why? So.
This obviously took a lot of time. I'm curious to when you started it, and I suppose it's ongoing.
So we actually started last Thursday. I don't know. The irony is they were sending small batches to UCI. Well, let me actually step this back. I've only been with UDOT now for 6 years, and so as a consultant to the DOT, I was always trying to get data from them, and then that part was kind of frustrating. When I joined the DOT and in the right-of-way division, I found out they were sending this piecemeal, you know, bits by bits, and it was it was frustrating for them and for us, because we kept changing our mind, and they kept wanting more, and we couldn't give it to them. We finally, in concert with them, loaded up the remaining cabinets. We sent them 26 cabinets at once. They stored them in their facility, and we said, go to town. It took them a little over a year to do all of that, but when you think about, they literally touch every single piece of paper. Some of it can go on the automatic feeders, some of it has to go on a flatbed. But the best thing for me is, it's not my time, and they have the resources to pull more people on the bigger your project is. So for me, if I have a big project, I'm sending it out to them, which, and this is giving me another shameless plug for them, they've got a copy center that is amazing, which is shocking to me. And so if you need something printed out, they will knock it out in a heartbeat. And let's think this through. They've got plenty of worker bees there. just you know, kind of Captain Obvious here for a minute, you know. So.
Hello. Do they?
Your choice. That is totally your choice. We elected to work with them and have them. I didn't want the stuff back. So they box it up. They understand that process very, very well. They understand which format, which series, and you can describe how you want it laid out, which boxes contain what material. We let them take care of it. And so they sent it right to State Archives. I didn't have to touch them again, and I got rid of 2 big, huge rooms, which was awesome.
James, what was the cost per document, and how did you budget that? Where did you find the money to do this?
I have a rich uncle. His name is Herbert. No, I apologize for that. I don't mean to be. We did 2 things. One is we allocated budget within our department for scanning, and then we actually buried some of the costs into our actual projects to make sure they stayed electronically. So to begin with, there was a serious upswing and a major expense to cover this. Now, the price we got, and I don't know if this is common across the board, I want to say it is, but you're talking less than a penny a page to have them scanned. So the larger the project, the cheaper your outcome. And what we did is we staged how and what they gave us back. We provided them with several external hard drives, and given the size, they had to be large drives. But we would do this series where I would give them a drive, they'd give me one back, and I'd give them another one, they'd fill it up. And we've gotten back, DTS hates me for this, but a lot of data. And it's consuming a lot of disk space. But the nice thing about that is now it's live data on our servers. So when we're done, if you want the contact information from UCI, I can give that to you. I apologize. It was the one thing I was going to put in my slide, which I didn't. Audrey Cahill, she's a state employee, so if you're state employees, you can search and find her in the state registry. She pulls up her email and her contact information. She manages the scanning division. In addition to her, Jeff Woodall is the other one who helps run the print shop, and they can give you the estimates and they can give you the price breakdown and the time. I do know they have availability right now, and they're looking for additional projects to take on. So if you have a project, they would love to talk with you. And no, I'm not here to plug them.
So what is the risk for personal information? Because you're working with court records and people's social security numbers and stuff like that. How do you work around that?
So the one thing for the DOT is number one, the Department of Transportation does not maintain, nor do we require or accept any social security numbers. Now, we do deal with sensitive data, and that data does not go to the prison. That's one of those where internally we have to decide what does or doesn't go. And even with that, there have been some cases where data has slipped through the cracks. They have been very good at, they have, again, one of their security guards who works with them, and he sees the data, they give it to him, and it's in a secure facility, so they can't take any papers out of their working environment. They can't copy anything in that environment. So we were shocked at what actually ended up in some of the stuff that came back to us. We didn't know how it even got in the files to begin with. But usually we're pretty good at securing that data before it goes to them up front. But if your agency collects that regularly, that is not data, and that is something you would not want to send to them, because that would be a problem, because they in turn would not accept that project because of that sensitive nature. So, but there again, you would definitely want to call them to see what they are willing to take and what files you could separate out to have them take care of. And again, the other nice thing is it doesn't matter if it's in folders, boxes, if it's in a brown paper garbage can, that they don't care how the data gets to them. They'll scan it all electronically for you, and they will box it up if you want, and then you get an electronic copy, and then do with the hard copy as you will. Some of the stuff, I mean, in some of the projects we've worked with them in the past, some of it they've actually shredded for us. So it's just a choice of what it is you want.
I'm curious so how did you set the parameters for them, what to name it, if it's in a big jumble?
Everything is named James Olschewski 1, 2. Project specific. So for us, every project has a project number associated with it. So for us, it made it nice. And then that's where our naming convention came in underneath that. It's like I-15 Core, the project we just did down in Utah County. It has a very unique government-approved number that identified the project. And then from there, we would label them as appraisal or appraisal review or acquisition file or condemnation file, and we would identify them that way. One of the things from right-of-way, every landowner has a parcel number, and we use that number to help identify the unique features about that individual file, which then makes that, again, metadata, or it's an attribute we can then use to search later from. So and that's where our naming convention comes into play to help understand. I'm not sure, what agency do you work with? You've got a couple options. I can think of a couple right off the top of my head as far as how you want to do it. I mean, county comes into mind, cities. I mean, it just depends on what is the data that you're trying to retrieve later. And from the way you want to retrieve it, for me, knowing what I want to retrieve is what I would name the file or attribute it so I could find that file. I don't want to give it some weird name that I'd never know what, what's inside of it. So like, the acquisition file, I would know that contains all my information dealing with the acquisition or condemnation or the appraisal. Some of it's very intuitive. I mean, an appraisal is what an appraisal is. So.
I have two questions. The first one is, if you have a digital copy, and this may not be your specific question, if you have a digital copy, is that your permanent copy, and do you need to keep the other copy?
Yes, no. So from the DOT standpoint, from right-of-way, I have to keep the original signatures, or what we call the wet copy.
So that's what went to the state archives?
That went to state archives.
It wasn't shredded?
No.
Okay.
So I have to keep that, and that's according to state policy and rules, and even within our own department, our rules and policies. Now, after that, now the state archives, they get to use their rules on that, but now internally, I have the digital files. Now it depends on what do I need to do. If I have to reproduce the document, what is the end user? If it's just an internal copy and I don't need the certified copy, I'm good to go. 99% of what I end up needing to reprint is not certified, and it's a non-issue. Plus, for me, usually what people want a certified copy of is the recorded document, the deed. Go see the county recorder's office.
And also, how are you planning on keeping your PDF files so they don't go obsolete?
Are you saying I'm obsolete?
No, not now. But we don't know how long PDF files are going to be good for. That's what we've been learning today.
PDFs, like most other programs, they have to have a backwards as well as a forward compatibility engine inside of them. Most software companies learn that through their natural migration. MicroStation and AutoCAD, it was kind of the same thing. They have old files that they need to be able to read. Now, it'll convert them into the new format, but there will still be a reader at some point, which is the nice thing, is because our data, I don't want anybody to edit it. I just want to be able to read it and view it. Okay? I'm being told we're done. Sorry. If you have questions, email me. My contact actually, I don't think I gave you my contact information. Come to the UDOT website. You can find me real easy. Just Google the UDOT Deputy Director of Right-of-Way. Not if you just do the Deputy Director, you'll get Shane Marshall. He's not as good looking as I am.